welcome to the British Library. Let's welcome our guest, Kell Ryan. I think a round of applause.
Thank you.
The first question that I'm drawn to ask you is that when you were growing up in a small, cramped house in Ireland, did you have any idea that Ryanair would happen, that something of that magnitude would happen, and you'd be looking at a business that is one of the biggest airlines in Europe? Did you have any inkling at all of that growing up?
Way back then, excuse me, my voice is going. We grew up, as I said, in a small house. In fact, we lived in a railway men's cottage in Tipperary before we moved down to Thurles. But I think then, I mean, times were tough. I was 10 when my father died. So I think at that stage, all we were thinking about was nearly survival and just having food. And funny enough, my brother, who you just mentioned there, Tony, he had just started to work for Aer Lingus, which is Ireland's national airline. So in fact, he became the breadwinner. And at that stage, he was like maybe 21. So he had to take on the responsibilities of the family, I think, at that stage. So to answer your question, I mean, I guess it wasn't in our minds then, but it was, the seeds were probably sown when he went to the States. He went to New York, working for Aer Lingus, having worked in Cork. And he was there in Aer Lingus, and they came to a stage where in the wintertime, Aer Lingus had 747s, and they didn't have requirement for them, and they were often mothballed. So they came up with an idea, maybe they could try and lease these airplanes out during the winter. So he was given that task, and he actually went out to Siam, as it was called then, and he leased these airplanes. And what he found out when he was there is that they were happy to get these aircraft, airline at the time, but the other contacts he made said, well, we want airplanes not just in the winter, we want them in the summer, we want them at various times of the year. And I think it was from there he got this idea that, you know, the world is much bigger than Shannon Airport. And that you can, you know, there was lots of opportunities out there. So then he formed this company, this leasing company, Guinness Peak Aviation. And that really, I think, was the start of his involvement in aviation on a much bigger scale.
You talked a bit about Tony, and I want to talk a little bit about him because I understand he passed in 2003. Yeah. And you said to me a few times that he was a visionary. Growing up, what was he like? And you talked a little bit about then him travelling abroad and so on. Tell us a little about him and his character, and did you spot anything entrepreneurial about him in the early growing up years?
No, I think it was that spark that happened when he maybe got out of Ireland and he worked in New York. He loved New York, and he used to say you should work in New York, but you should have the weekends in Ireland. And he obviously did a lot of travelling. With the leasing, he went around the world, and I think he saw that there was a lot of opportunities out there that had been denied if you were still living in Ireland. And I think that was the catalyst. He started up lots of different businesses at that stage, and it was one of those, he had different companies and different things, and one of them was Ryanair, because he felt that there had to be, travel was so expensive and so restrictive, and he wanted to encourage tourism in Ireland. And to create jobs and opportunities to advance. And that really was the foundation of Ryanair. It was a very simple thing to do, but it had never been done before.
Can you tell us, what kind of timing was this? Because having this kind of idea, from what I know about the airline industry, there were big players. It's an incredibly expensive kind of industry. What time frame did he first have this idea and expressing that kind of idea of having this kind of dream of setting up an airline?
Well, I think in his travels, he'd come across, I think at that stage, you know, Southwest Airline, who was the daddy of all low-cost airlines. In fact, they've been profitable as an airline every year for the last 41 years. I mean, it's unbelievable. But he also felt that there was a need, that fares were too high and that it was restricting growth. And certainly, if somebody came to England, they would never get back to Ireland. Right. They might get back to be buried, maybe.
Right. So is this then, what, the 60s, first of all, having these ideas, or 70s, or what?
The 80s.
Kind of,
I mean, the airline started in 85. And up to that time, it was a complete duopoly. There was just Aer Lingus and British Airways. They operated the route between them, and they shared out whatever profits. And if there wasn't any profits, it didn't really matter, because BA was, at that stage, wasn't a private airline, and neither was Aer Lingus, were government-owned airlines. Right. So they just operated like a lot of carriers did at that time. Aviation has been around, flying has been around maybe 75 years now, and nothing really had changed at all. Nothing had changed in aviation in terms of low fares. And he saw that opportunity, and he felt that you could have the low fares if you operated, slightly different.